Lamadang Gumban Jambe Yong La Shaza Lo Kongke Lodrö Thaye Nyedra Namda Rapsarave Chinye Dungön Chijin Sich Nije Tukra Levam Zen Sibe Zunr Samdungne Chizeve Zokan La Puje Dar Inai Tuju Yongden Son Rudrai Chedo Nyamon Yelo Leje Chagdo Ndronze Jin Mare Mens Dungara Nyuku Chenye Chenze Rajanam Dene Dajin Saju Tarsen Din Luzo Jase Tuveku Chödrak Chödrak Chöni Jente Dagle Mes Jambe Yong La Du Zeden Cheje Chira Vesreche Dagle Temo Men Parapsrane Kadang Tenje Jong Lo Tokpa Ye Lodrö Pope Nongwa Zal Tu Soru Tamge Tuje Shakje Riksu Tong Yenje Medo Duje Bongjamba Serje Boda Vraji Beko Shakje Jebe Shakla Shakje Tempe Manam Geso Me Jongshin Chepa Cheji Tselang Chejurji Kazong Chigla Sanje Zepa Tarshin Pe Zogwe Sanje Tongla Shaje Yang Shana Dorje Jinre Zi Sayen Nimbo Deba Nambrasar Namke Nimbo Shamba Kondozong Nyeve Seshin Jelang Gesha Tsara Cherabgondo Sije Tani Le Tamge Samu Shagi Yong Zongxin Shangchum Himbe Lamken Karma Pa Mishe Tebe Chivu Tsuge Du La Sota La Tong Shebe Gab Song Zang La Tong Shebe Gab La Subject number Ngale Da subject Tamade Tribe Tse Tamba Singit.
So today the fifth and last principal part of the text which sets forth Vipassana meditation will be explained, and it's titled The Measure of Accomplishment.
Tati Chen De Perna Anzo Ta Kong Du Xie Xia La Tong Den Zo La Mi Ba Tse Ji Du Dene Chi Gam Nang Yong Ga La Tama De La Drev Raw De Xin Zhong De Top Gra Lu Xin Zhong De Sem Xin Zhong Xin Zhong Ni De Ma To De Par Du La Tong Kare Gam Bi Yue Na Yang De La Tong Jin Tuen Ba Re Ma To La Tong Ngui Cha Yo Ma Re Song Ma
So the various methods, procedures, and so on, how one trains in Vipassana in terms of how one trains in Vipassana meditation, have been explained previously. And if one were to sum up, it's primarily about cultivating a one-pointed focus while meditating in the context of various methods, in consequence of which the practitioner can, if he is successful in how he executes the meditation, the practitioner can attain so-called refinement through thorough training with respect both to the physical body and the mind. And once thorough refinement through training has been achieved, then the practitioner has achieved vipassana proper. His previous practice of vipassana meditation has just been a similitude of vipassana proper. That is to say, prior to the practitioner accomplishing thorough refinement through training.
Tati pedujinde songare pevna sosol to bisharki
Sosur de kavadrago.
sosol to bisharap tin yul rere chindu takje tangne.
So, as has been explained earlier, higher knowledge in terms of vipassana meditation is to focus upon, meditate upon, whether by way of analytic meditation or resting meditation, on various perspectives.
Sosol to bisharap bichene yul sangma nodong sungjuk yimbala dongbo goadelem gopi.
And in terms of a person training here, what the practitioner first achieves is knowledge of, on the basis of knowledge of the essencelessness of outer objects. However, on the beginning stages, it's about an understanding of what essenceless is in terms of outer objects. So it's not a matter of a realization of essencelessness. It's rather an understanding of it to begin with.
Tene nang semle yang chittawe chöle ne tiyang sarkung grang yin yimba.
Then there is the mind that meditates and its essencelessness, as it were. The mind that has taken this course of action, that of focusing upon the mind in order to find its true nature, as it were. Mm-hmm. And to begin with, the practitioner achieves an understanding of mind's true nature, which, as has been explained earlier, is about the union of enlightening or illuminating knowledge, knowing its empty nature. The practitioner is then to cultivate the understanding he has achieved by way of using the methods taught to him in order to familiarize himself with this way of viewing or looking at outer objects and the mind which knows those objects.
That is gone to then Xinjiang Singit.
And it's during this process that refinement through thorough training can be achieved.
That in this Xinjiang de Yang, Sem Xinjiang Tang Lu Xinjiang Ni Yong Ge.
And as was said, there are two perspectives, refinement through thorough training in terms of the physical body and in terms of the mind.
That did not your patella, Toma, Xinekam the song, Xinjiang Ni Botan Drubing you said.
Det skinnig kapsul drupsamere.
The Xinekam the Xie or Nani.
Det 20 minuter. Det där som gör va. Skinnig kapsul gi Xinjiang te. Den är kare som så.
Xinekam la, Xinegi Xinjiang den Drubing Gurwa. Xinegi Xinjiang den Drup Sargela Hatong Gamion, Tin Rabu Jil Hatong Xinjiang Telelevi.
Now, the practitioner who has gone about the process of meditating the way he should, namely, he has started out with training in shamatha meditation and achieved a calm state. And in the context of shamatha meditation, one also finds refinement through thorough training, achieved on the basis of shamatha meditation. And the kind of refinement through thorough training in the context of shamatha meditation is similar to the same in terms of vipassana meditation. So there wouldn't be a big difference between refinement through thorough training in the context of shamatha meditation when compared to the same in the context of vipassana.
Penna Hatung Gabge, Tang Xinjiang de Zundrubion de Xinele, Hava Karium Biorsana, Sem Xinjiang Ge, Drumne Hatung Gabla, Sem Xinjiang Drumneta, Tengen Zing the Shung Dewa Tang Gawa Tang Tam, Tinda Mona Yang, Tenso La, Rajin Matupate, Tata Leptikiot, Kotikiot.
A couple of times Khenpo Rinpoche has explained the name Vipassana, Hlaktong in Tibetan, as the vision that's superior to the vision possible to be achieved by way of shamatha meditation alone. So or rather knowledge-wise, in terms of insight, the level of insight achieved by way of vipassana meditation is higher than the level achieved by way of shamatha meditation. So that's why vipassana meditation is superior to shamatha meditation in terms of what is achieved by way of the meditation in question. So what does this mean then in terms of, or in the context of refinement through thorough training? Well, it primarily regards refinement through thorough training in the context of the mind. In the context of the physical body, they appear to be quite similar. That is to say, refinement by way of shamatha meditation and refinement by way of vipassana meditation. So what's the difference then as to the mindset in the context of refinement through thorough training? Well, when experiences in consequence of the meditative practice happen, experiences of well-being and the like, the practitioner who in the context of Vipassana meditation has achieved refinement through thorough training would not react with attachment to these experiences. Whereas, as has been explained earlier, that may happen in the case of a practitioner at the level of shamatha meditation, because of course in the context of that meditation as well there will be such experiences.
Thì ta xem sinh用từng rụp用thứ nghe ý để ghéo là cả xe có được na yang
Ja, yi tanda kandreshik.
xem nghe xem để ghéo là có được tiếng Anh sinh đâu cho gam để vậy na.
Me det shugi me da. Yi de chupa yi gi nam shera ba.
Ja, ta
Det kogore kandreshik kogore na.
ta mixe gi ý sinh để yêu cái yang mà xíu đấy.
Ma chevare.
Để xem sinh用xong rồi đấy.
Sem shinjo.
Xem sinh用từng rụp用thứ
Lasso.
nghe xem để ghéo là chết trong có được na, cái này chẳng chơi ghéo.
Furthermore, in the context of refinement through thorough training at the level of Vipassana meditation, the practitioner who has achieved refinement, when he makes efforts in terms of making the mind, as it were, in terms of his practice, what one does is to employ the mind in virtue by way of focusing on an object of meditation and so on and so forth. It's all about virtue. Whatever done properly in the context of here meditation at the level of Vipassana meditation is about virtue. And the practitioner who has attained refinement in terms of his mindset will experience no difficulties or problems, as it were, in terms of employing his mind in virtue during the meditation by way of focusing on the essencelessness of outer objects or whatever the focus is. The practitioner here doesn't have problems or difficulties in terms of doing this. There is sort of a more natural flow in terms of the meditation than in the case of a person who has not attained refinement through thorough training. You see, tiredness or meditating, being able to meditating for a limited period of time only because then it's too much for the practitioner, these sort of things no longer happen. The level here is such that the practitioner doesn't need much sleep, if any sleep at all. The practitioner here can just continue the meditative state for as long as he desires to do so. He doesn't need to make a break in order to refresh himself, or he doesn't need to end his evening session so he can get a good night's sleep before he meditates tomorrow morning, he can just continue.
Penna tindawa tensor ge tula penna nafsim nersim loktas ge namyang korea mebre shinjong drup chadu.
And worldly negative states such as greed, the intent to harm, wrong views, these being the three primary non-virtues as to the mindset, these no longer occur in the mind of this meditator. This meditator's mind is freed of those non-virtuous actions. And then there is refinement through thorough training in the context of the physical body. There you have, in terms of non-virtue, as to the list of the 10 non-virtuous actions, you have deeds, where the person employs the physical body in order to enact these non-virtuous deeds. And in the context of physical deeds, there is a list of 3. And in the context of speech, there is a list of 4. And the individual who has achieved refinement through thorough training has also freed himself of engaging in these non-virtuous actions as well. The practitioner has truly seen the essencelessness of all things. Therefore, his mind is free of any impulse or intention in the context of non-virtue. Now, the physical body, from the viewpoint of Buddhism, and thus from the viewpoint also of those practitioners who has achieved refinement as to both body and mind, to them the physical body is simply a collection of parts that make for suffering, different types of suffering. That's the way they view the physical body, in consequence of their realization. And it's explained that the practitioner who has attained refinement with respect to, for example, the body, even though his body is still prey to disease, and therefore the individual at hand will fall ill from time to time, in terms of this person's personal experience of the illness, he or she does not experience the illness the way we do. He is not plagued by it, as it were. And the practitioner at this level also doesn't need to feed himself the way people in the regular world do, namely one needs 3 meals a day in order to keep going, and so on and so forth. food is also not that much of an issue for this practitioner.
Pernang tanda Jamgön Thaye dojil pe shubina maratikal pebde nam nin sing asingetel chutti pa jing sheyo marwa tingan ze chig gel yug yarwa
Chi tu
yor
Chi yor.
ya
So
ngajo one sedum
yes,
de
det mari nge kan skilla gå under transport.
ya sedum de yorwa
So the present Karmapa, Thaye Dorje, recently, it's a few years back, went to the Maratika cave, a cave where Guru Padmasambhava is said to have attained the siddhi of so-called long life. And this is a place of pilgrimage for Buddhists. And His Holiness went there a couple of years back. And he remained in the cave for 5 days and nights while there, without either taking food or drinking. He simply just remained in meditation without any interruption. He did not even have to visit the facilities for relieving the body of bodily waste. Some of the Rinpoches, among others, Sang Rinpoche and Lama Shirap Jansen Rinpoche, worried a bit on and off and had food made and then waited to see if His Holiness would exit the cave in order to take some food, but he didn't. So apparently, or this then is an example which illustrates the level of achievement of the practitioner who has attained refinement through thorough training, both with respect to body and mind.
Tanda kandu shunyong lama kaluru chet che rising de juk de hyung unyong shuyi lo chunyi che rina la so ro regna juk de ro.
Now there is another example, the late Lama Khenpo Rinpoche, who, while still in Tibet, disappeared for 12 years. No one knew where he dwelled. Some people tried to find him, but were not able to do so. He had simply vanished into the mountains of Tibet and practiced there in solitude for a period of 12 years. And Khenpo Rinpoche, during one of his meetings with the late Lama Khenpo Rinpoche, asked him, during this period, did you ever fall ill? He said no. And what about feeding yourself? Khenpo Rinpoche had asked Khenpo Rinpoche. Well, he said, there was one person, very devoted to me, who would bring from time to time a supply of tsamba, barley flour. And that was that. Other than that, I collected herbs in the wild and Whether he cooked them or not, I do not know. The story doesn't tell. And that's how I fed myself during this period. He had told Khenpo Rinpoche. He had also explained, if you can truly meditate, you don't need a lot of food. And if you fall ill, it's not a big problem. So apparently, or this would be signs of that the late Khenpo Rinpoche had attained refinement through thorough training, both with respect to the body and the mind. We, on the other hand, feel hungry and become tired and short-tempered if we don't get one of the 3 meals we usually eat every day or we take every day.
Sanjay Gongbang Yendel Tang, Floven Shent Panikage, the Songsha Chevers.
So, what has been explained here about refinement through thorough training with respect to the physical body and the mind, the author explains his sources for the explanation given, or explanations given, are the Sutra Unraveling the Thought and the quintessential instructions on the Prajna Paramita by Shantipa. So that completes the explanations of Vipassana meditation.
Course ma
So, as has been explained earlier, or to sum up, this segment of the text is divided into 5 parts.
And
the first of the 5 parts is about the prerequisites for Vipassana. So that part tells the reader or the practitioner about what the causes for practicing and accomplishing Vipassana are.
The
first of these is that of relying upon an authentic spiritual master. The second is to study and contemplate the Buddhist scriptures extensively.
Somebody
the third is Tavala. Yeah. The third is to acquire knowledge of the unmistaken viewpoint, which is to be the basis for the meditation.
Tene subject ipatala Hatung Yewa Singatari.
Then we have the second of the 5 parts, which lists the particular types of vipassana.
Then the number Hatung Yina Nintu Tang Ransanje Tekwachim Tawa Mendra some Gelanyam Sulingo Yarwa.
Tavade, eh?
Yeah.
And
Penna de Segedua.
Mare. Det sumpare va, tava manor var det. Da niente rangyaltang tection tava kaka re sum so va.
Yeah.
There we go.
Te Mare.
Mare.
That Tawa Yonda say take subject Tongo to Chad.
Ne. Subject tompo te sarm.
Platon Gambe Ju Sigit.
Yes.
Te Chad.
Me tanda de nipare va. Plaktonki gijeva.
Yewatela Turi.
Yes.
Yewatela Jiktin Beplaton, Jiktin and Debelaton Ni.
So in terms of the particular types of vipassana, you have 2 basic types, worldly vipassana and otherworldly vipassana.
Jiktin Beplaton said, Penna Sawoma getting and Zent Rakpanda or Tene, Kumalian Rotabchevatal, Jiktin
And
Beplaton.
in terms of a worldly type of vipassana meditation, what is contemplated or meditated upon is the following, namely various meditative states that can be achieved, states that are about a calm state, and the practitioner considers the various levels that there are and compare the different levels to one another so that an understanding of that the extent of a calm state is lower on a lower level and higher on a higher level, meaning the mindset of the lower levels is more coarse than the mindset of the higher levels. And the mindset of the higher levels is therefore categorized as subtle.
Then Jiktin and Debel Halton Tela, Nintuch Halton, Ranjet Halton, take Pachim Halton, Middle Sum.
And then in terms of otherworldly vipassana meditation, meaning vipassana meditation on the basis of which it is possible to attain liberation from rebirthing worldly existences. Here you have 3 basic categories. Vipassana meditation in the context of the Shravaka tradition, in the context of the Pratyeka Buddha tradition, and in the context of Mahayana Buddhism.
That in the Nintopage, Damba Higitandala, Zigne, Did and Laton Gambiot.
And Vipassana meditation in the Shravaka tradition is primarily about, or the primary focus of the meditation there is the 4 Noble Truths.
Rangyal ki tender ki thanla samna tone toni to get that toni to Gambiot.
Whereas in the Pratyeka Buddha tradition, the primary focus is the process of dependent occurrence with the aim of acquiring a realization of the emptiness of all that's involved in that process. All that makes for this process.
That take what Chimboyina.
Then there is Mahayana Buddhism.
Chödrak Thaye, Drupa Jedam Talve. Then Chödrak number Yag.
There, the goal is to attain a state beyond mental fabrications, and that state, free from mental fabrications, does not involve limiting viewpoints. There is traditionally a list of 4 limiting viewpoints, as well as a list of 8 primary types of mental fabrications. And the aim in Mahayana Buddhism for the practitioner of Vipassana meditation is to go beyond all of that, thus freeing the mind from all types of mental fabrication.
That's somebody ngol rap to yewa sikit. Latung ngol yewa sena.
And then, in terms of the third of the 5 parts, it is titled The Classification According to Essential Nature.
Te number yewa.
Oh, yeah. And the types are 1. Ascertaining the perspective, or it's about ascertaining a specific perspective, and the perspective here, in terms of the first type, is that of what outer objects of knowledge in fact are. That is to say, in terms of their nature.
That is jeje jinye pichula jesu jire de yorwa.
So here, objects of knowledge include all objects of knowledge, as many as there are.
Then
we have the second type, which is about ascertaining a further perspective. So that the process of ascertaining the nature of reality is complete in that it includes both outer objects and the mind. And here again, the goal is to accomplish or attain knowledge of what the mind, which knows objects, in fact is. That is to say, in terms of its nature. Then the text mentions yet another classification here, called the 3 gateways. Followed by yet another categorization or classification called the 6 investigations.
That's all what took in an ma shifted motor shooting, that's what
so here earlier Khenpo Rinpoche explained the first of the 6. He chose to not go into the remaining 5 because he thinks that perhaps it would be too much information into a short period of time for some members of the audience, perhaps all, in that perhaps the majority of the members of the audience haven't heard about these categories previously.
Lasso di jetna gamsu ngötere subject yivat.
Then we have the fourth of the 5 parts, the way to meditate.
Ta gamsu ngötela dami ni la chepa tangne tene dami ni ko pingsu pa chileb gore somar thoma.
Where to begin with, the practitioner analyzes selflessness or essencelessness with respect to both objects of knowledge and the mind that knows them in order to familiarize himself with their nature. And once a comprehensive knowledge of this has been achieved, the practitioner then goes on to rest in that knowledge. There is no need to continue analytic meditation. That may be counterproductive, in that this may make for interruptions in terms of that knowledge, the knowledge which rests in a state which knows the essencelessness of both objects and the mind.
Tanjo de jopatela kamne de dingen de la jeni san marua chilegre song.
Once proper resting meditation in terms of the capacity of the practitioner has been achieved, a sign of that would be that the practitioner would no longer feel inclined to go back to analytic meditation. However, having lost the inclination to engage in analytic meditation altogether wouldn't be a good sign. It may be an indication of the meditator's mind having become dull and having lost the clear and precise knowledge of essencelessness he had achieved earlier. Therefore, when this happens, namely, one loses the inclination for analytic meditation, if that happens, one should go back to analytic meditation in order to remedy this. One actually has to do away with the meditative state one has now fallen into, a meditative state that is no longer clear and precise, but rather dull.
There
are reports about individuals who have been advised, because of this sort of thing happening, to go back to analytic meditation, reacting with anger actually, wanting to remain in the dull state at hand, having taken the wrong view that this is the proper meditative state.
Which
clearly indicates that this practitioner has lost it with respect to Vipassana meditation. He needs to do away with the state he's in order to get back to proper Vipassana.
Lasso that Taluge summer course day, the troops on.
So that ends this year's summer course.
Tene Talu Jemege summer course, Himindu Nane, Tagol took to be Rawachegi.
Khenpo Rinpoche says if he survives yet another year, he would like to hold the summer course at Dakpo Kadelin then. However, of course, one has to take things into consideration and see what the situation is then. However, that is the plan at this point.
Tene, Mone, Maranzo Ranjin, Suina Yang, Dujem Metabuche de la Samanende, Tangne, that chive to Nato, the Pember drop to Ziet and Hachanke Champre, some.
What's very important is that everyone makes efforts to see the impermanent nature of everything, the impermanent nature of one's lifespan. And in consequence, devote as much time as possible to proper practice of the path. Because that would benefit at the time of death. Because whatever one may have in this world, financial wealth, good reputation, whatever, all of it will end. All of it is impermanent. Nothing of what one has will last. And on the day of one's death, one even loses one's own physical body. One will no longer have a physical body. Now, the author, Jamgön Kongtrül, here, in terms of setting forth shamatha and vipassana, primarily quotes the sutra Unraveling the Thought. So, the words of Buddha Shakyamuni himself.
Tene yang ne yang to zig java that log get a campach nana, she do in Jam go at some younger ba.
So, in brief, for there to be some benefit at the time of death, it would be advisable if everyone reads the text many times, do so on a frequent basis, in order to acquire knowledge of these two practices so that these two practices can be done properly.
Jetan pesha kari ina pesha ina dra chue xie ya tonda ina de yang nin na kwa de sabu roye chinduga sanjik song seketal.
Now, in terms of whatever scripture is at hand, in the context of Buddhism, this is the way to go, as it were. Whether it's a scripture or a transcript of a lecture, the practitioner needs to frequently go through the material many times.
Tene lo nanda jitsam lo na tetsam koada sabro sanje
And the more one does this, the more profound one's knowledge of the topic at hand will be.
Tene sanje song te sabon rogi.
As was said, the words of the text we've gone through that sets forth shamatha vipassana meditation is based in a Buddhist sutra. Therefore, we're dealing with the very words of Buddha Shakyamuni himself that carry great spiritual influence, which, when one diligently restudies any text, will make for a more profound knowledge of the contents of the text.
Tene koada sabon rode tende kecha shenking ge tambatala yang ngazo ichi chedu.
And in this way, confidence in the spiritual friend who explains the text at hand would be possible.
Tene tende ichi sona tene ichi tela tene sanye bardun jita yom kabla yang sanye yila tainto.
And here, the ultimate instructor, as it were, is Buddha Shakyamuni himself, in that the text is based on what he said. So, if one, in consequence of diligently applying oneself in terms of acquiring knowledge of the text, confidence to a much greater extent in Buddha Shakyamuni would result, and that will benefit one at the time of death. At the time of death, it is certain that everyone has to face the fears of death and dying, and then the appearances and circumstances of the state between death and a new rebirth. However, if one has true trust and confidence in the three jewels, then that at the time of death will benefit one, so that the fear-inspiring circumstances of the state between death and a new rebirth can perhaps be avoided.
So,
Khenpo Rinpoche wishes you a good health.
Sundam de Tomja Zegbani, Tomne Yebe, Ranam Pamchete, Shaganaje, Balap Trubai, Sigbe, Solen Rowa, Show Jewan Dene, Serap Tamje, do some Yarwa Gunje Chene, Karma Baye, Tadu Jason, Sanchuk Joy, you want your show.